Amy picked up the old album and quietly turned its pages. The soft evening light filtered through the sheer curtains of her La Jolla apartment, tinting the white walls with the golden glow of California's dying sun. The sound of the distant ocean reached her faintly, but her mind was far from serene. The smiling faces in the photographs, the young couple brimming with hope, now felt like relics from another lifetime. There she was in her crisp white nurse's coat, and beside her stood Michael in his modest student uniform. His hand was casually draped over her shoulder, his boyish smile full of ambition and promise. She could almost hear his voice again. "Listen, Amy, when I become a doctor, I'll make you happy. It might be tough now, but there will definitely be a day when it all pays off." Back then, she had believed every word. She worked endless night shifts, her hands raw from sanitizers and her feet aching from hours on the ward floor, just so Michael could study without distraction. Their one-bedroom apartment had smelled constantly of textbooks, instant noodles, and the cheap coffee they both pretended tasted good. She used to slip him notes of encouragement on exam days, prepare sandwiches when they couldn't afford takeout, and massage his shoulders when he collapsed at the desk after 16 hours of memorizing anatomy charts. She thought they were fighting side by side, building a future brick by brick. Her hand trembled as she touched one photo in particular, their wedding day. Her platinum wedding band, once a symbol of eternal devotion, gleamed faintly in the fading light. The engraving inside, "Michael Amy, Forever," felt like a cruel joke now. With deliberate care, she slid the ring off her finger. For a moment, she stared at the groove it had left in her skin, then placed it into the small pink jewelry box her grandmother had once given her. Tears blurred her vision. Outside, the horizon burned crimson, as though the sky itself carried her grief. Her thoughts drifted to Jessica, her younger sister, the dazzling child who had always been at the center of attention. Amy had lived in Jessica's shadow since childhood. Recitals, sports meets, birthdays, Christmas mornings, it was always Jessica who received the spotlight, the applause, the admiration. "Amy, you're the older one. You should be more understanding. Jessica's special." Her mother's words from years ago echoed with a sting sharper than ever. And yet Amy had accepted it. She had convinced herself that family meant sacrifice, that her own happiness mattered less than her sister's. She had believed it right up until that fateful day in the hospital corridor. A single notification flashing on Michael's phone, a message from Jessica. A photograph, a heart emoji. And then, a flood of messages revealing secret dinners at high-end restaurants, weekend trips to hotels, whispered words of forbidden love. Her knees had nearly buckled. The sterile hallway had seemed to close in on her, her vision darkening as if the world itself had betrayed her. The nurse who caught her arm that day probably never knew she had stopped Amy from collapsing completely. The man she had built her life around. The sister she had loved and defended. Together, behind her back. Her world crumbled in silence. It was only after transferring to Scripps Mercy Hospital that Amy began to breathe again. There, in the bright but fragile smiles of sick children, she found a reason to keep moving forward. The weight of betrayal began to lift in the presence of innocence, the children who clutched her hand with faith, who trusted her without conditions. And then there was David, director of the hospital. His praise had been simple, professional at first. "Miss Brown, your work is outstanding. We're fortunate to have a nurse like you." But in his warm gaze, she had sensed something deeper. A quiet recognition, an unspoken understanding of the kind of strength that comes from surviving heartbreak. A small flame of hope had ignited in her chest. Amy closed the album with a soft thud, wiped her tears, and placed it back on the shelf. Tomorrow, she told herself, would be a new day. She would not look back anymore. That was when she noticed the envelope waiting in her mailbox. Heavy cardstock, gold embossing, luxury design. Her fingers froze as she tore it open. A wedding at the Manchester Grand Hyatt. Jessica and Michael's wedding. The air left her lungs. Later, her mother's cheerful voice on the phone was as cruel as a blade. "Amy, you'll come, won't you? We want the whole family there. Jessica's looking forward to seeing you." As though nothing had happened. As though betrayal could be swept under a rug of champagne and roses. At the hospital, Amy confided in Carol, the veteran nurse whose silver-streaked hair and gentle manner gave her the air of a second mother. The break room smelled faintly of coffee as Carol listened quietly. "Amy, you've done nothing wrong," Carol said, squeezing her hand. "If you don't go, they'll think they've won. Show them your strength. Besides, life often holds unexpected happiness." Those words settled in Amy's heart, though she didn't yet realize just how prophetic they would be. The wedding day arrived. The Manchester Grand Hyatt glittered like a palace, its chandeliers scattering light like tears from the heavens. The ballroom smelled of lilies and roses. A carpet the color of fresh blood stretched toward the altar, where Jessica would claim her prize in a designer gown worth more than Amy had made in a year. Amy wore a simple light blue dress. Modest, understated. Around her neck hung her grandmother's pearls, the last anchor to a family that had always overlooked her. The stares came the moment she entered. Friends turned away. Relatives whispered behind their hands. Even her parents avoided her eyes, faces glowing with pride for their favorite daughter. Amy lowered her gaze, clutching her small handbag as if it could shield her from their judgment. And then the ceremony began. Jessica glided down the aisle in white silk and diamonds, her smile as dazzling as ever. Michael waited in his tuxedo, smugness etched into every line of his face. The vows were spoken, the rings exchanged. A kiss sealed their betrayal in front of God and man. At the reception, laughter rang, glasses clinked, and the smell of roasted prime rib filled the air. The grandeur pressed down on Amy like a weight. She was about to slip quietly away when Jessica's voice cut through the noise. "Especially my sister, Amy, who's here with us today. Amy, could you stand for a moment?" Amy's heart froze. Slowly, painfully, she rose. Jessica's smile curved into cruelty. "Everyone, please look at my sister. She's my ugly sister, the one nobody loves. Is there anyone who would take her?" Laughter rippled through the hall. Michael took the microphone next, his arrogance unmasked. "She's used goods, but still usable. I guarantee it." The laughter grew louder. Even her parents' lips twitched with faint amusement. Amy's hands shook so violently her handbag slipped nearly from her grasp. The humiliation pressed against her chest like a vice, suffocating her. And then, the scrape of a chair. Slow, deliberate. From the back of the hall, a tall man in a navy suit rose to his feet. His presence was commanding, his gaze unwavering. Every whisper died into silence. It was David. As he walked forward, the room seemed to shift. Jessica's smile faltered. Michael's expression turned ashen. David reached the stage, his steps echoing like a judge approaching the bench. He took the microphone from Jessica's trembling hands. His voice, calm yet firm, carried across the hall. "I am David Carter, director of the National Children's Medical Center." The venue carried an almost sacred weight, the kind of solemn authority that came not from wealth or prestige, but from the presence of a man who had saved countless lives. The air was heavy with expectation. Conversations hushed into whispers, then into silence. A murmur rippled through the crowd like a subtle wave. "Who is he?" Jessica leaned toward her husband, her jeweled earrings swaying under the golden chandeliers. Michael's jaw tightened. He recognized the man immediately. This wasn't just any doctor, it was David Grant, one of the most respected pediatric physicians in the country. His work at the top children's hospital in America had made headlines more than once. Michael had envied him from afar, but never imagined standing in the same room. David represented everything Michael could never reach. The microphone carried David's calm, steady voice. "Today," he began, his gaze sweeping over the guests, "I'd like to talk about a nurse." Gasps rippled through the hall. Guests glanced at one another. Why would a man of his status speak about a nurse at such a grand gathering? Then David's eyes fell softly on Amy. "She is one of the most trusted nurses at our hospital. Even after long night shifts, she doesn't go home to rest. Instead, she visits the rooms of critically ill children. She holds the hands of exhausted mothers, whispers encouragement to frightened fathers, and sings lullabies to children who have known more pain than they should in a lifetime." The venue went utterly silent. Even the chandeliers seemed to glow more softly, as though listening. "Last month," David continued, his voice steady but touched with emotion, "a 6-month-old baby was brought in with a life-threatening heart condition. The parents were devastated, unable to do anything but cry. At that time, Amy stayed with that baby for 48 hours, resting barely at all. She refused to leave until she was certain the child was safe. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a photograph. "Look," he said, holding it high. A smiling baby, smiling parents, and Amy, her face tired, yet her eyes filled with kindness. This, his voice grew firm, is what true love and dedication look like. A voice suddenly broke through the stillness. From the back of the venue, a woman stood, her arms cradling a girl of about 8 years old. The girl had rosy cheeks and wide eyes full of life. "This is my daughter, Sarah," the woman announced, her voice trembling. 2 years ago, she nearly died of severe pneumonia. Miss Amy was the one who read storybooks to Sarah every night. She held her hand through fevers and tears, never once letting go. And when Sarah's condition worsened in the middle of the night, Amy was the first to rush to her side. "My daughter is alive today because of her." The woman's voice broke. "To us, Amy is an angel." At those words, others began to rise from their seats, colleagues from the hospital, parents of children who had once hovered at the edge of death, families who remembered Amy's presence as a light in their darkest hours. One by one, they spoke, stories of encouragement, sacrifices, nights Amy had given up her rest so others could sleep in peace. The atmosphere shifted, gratitude filled the air, pouring toward Amy like an invisible tide. David raised the microphone again, his eyes glistening. "Yes," he said with conviction, "she is a treasure at our hospital. She saves children in life-threatening conditions, and she preserves hope when the world seems most cruel. Tell me, who could ever believe such a person is unloved?" The faces of the guests transformed. Their earlier whispers of mockery were replaced by awe. Jessica and Michael's faces drained of color, while their parents lowered their eyes in shame. David's tone shifted, carrying a new weight. "But there is something else I must share with you." He paused, and the silence deepened. "Recently, we received preliminary notification from the American Pediatric Nursing Association. Their annual Excellence in Nursing Award will be given to Amy Brown." The room erupted. Applause thundered like a storm. Cheers rose from every corner. Amy, trembling, covered her mouth with her hands. Tears streamed freely down her cheeks. It felt as though the years of pain, betrayal, and quiet endurance had been lifted and replaced with the recognition she had never sought, but always deserved. But David was not finished. His gaze sharpened as it landed on Michael. "And you," he said, his voice like steel. "You dare to sit here while the world applauds Amy? Aren't you ashamed? A doctor who falsified patient records, who bullied residents, who betrayed not only his profession but his wife, who, worst of all, carried on an affair with her sister? My hospital would never hire a man like you." Michael collapsed into his chair, his face gray. Whispers surged through the venue like wildfire. "And you, Jessica." David turned, his words striking like arrows. "You tried to destroy your own sister out of jealousy. But truly valuable people do not seek joy in another's misery. They are the ones who save lives, who give hope to the hopeless. People like Amy." Gasps spread across the room. Jessica's hand tightened on her gown, her knuckles pale. David then stepped down from the stage. His stride was confident, his presence commanding. As he walked toward Amy, the sunset streamed through the tall windows, bathing the hall in golden light. He stopped before her, and the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. "Amy," David said softly, his voice no longer stern but filled with warmth. "You are the one most deserving of love. I came here today to prove that. I remember the first time I saw you, after a night shift, exhausted, yet still reading a storybook to a sick child. That sight captured my heart." Amy's tears flowed faster. His words seemed to carve themselves into her very soul. "Your smile," David continued, "is a beacon of hope for children. Your kindness sustains families when they are at their weakest. And your dedication, your sacrifice, is the pride of our entire staff. Amy, every day you reminded me of what it means to be human, to be good, to love without condition. I could not help but be moved." And then, before the stunned audience, David sank to one knee. A diamond ring gleamed in his hand, catching the sunset and scattering rainbow light across the hall. "But before I ask, the truth must be told." His voice hardened. "Michael Thompson is not the man you thought he was. Last year, after a heart surgery mistake, he falsified the records to hide his error. The patient lived, not because of his skill, but because of the emergency team's desperate efforts. The room stirred. Michael tried to rise, but his legs trembled violently. And Jessica. David's eyes pierced her. Your so-called perfect image is nothing but a facade. 3 years ago, you had an affair with a married man, a company president. His wife sued for damages, and Michael paid the settlement money. And that isn't all. Your embezzlement at the beauty salon is under investigation. Even this wedding, funded with stolen money. Jessica's face drained of color. Her white dress seemed less like purity and more like a cruel joke. She broke down, collapsing to the floor in sobs. David then revealed an envelope. This is Michael's termination notice. His license is under review for revocation. His debts, his deceit, they will all come to light. And Jessica, your fraud will follow you. The hall was in chaos. Guests murmured in shock, disbelief, judgment, but David's voice rose above it, regaining its gentleness. Yet I did not come to dwell on betrayal. I came here to prove love. He lifted the ring higher, the light dancing through it. His eyes never left Amy's. Amy Brown, will you marry me? Will you let me cherish your heart, your kindness, and your strength for the rest of my life? The room froze. The only sound was Amy's trembling sobs. Then, a small hand tugged at Amy's dress. Little Sarah, the girl whose life she had once saved, held out a bouquet of white roses. Her innocent voice rang out, pure as a bell. Be happy. Amy's tears overflowed. Her heart felt as though it would burst. She looked at David, her voice breaking but certain. Yes, I would love to. The hall exploded in thunderous applause. Guests rose to their feet, clapping through their own tears. Even Amy's parents, who had once belittled her, stood with faces wet, their pride and shame mingling in silence. David slipped the ring gently onto her finger. It felt unlike anything she had ever worn before, not just a symbol of love, but of respect, recognition, and a future built on truth. He drew her into his arms. Together, he whispered, for the sake of the children's smiles. The chandeliers caught the last rays of the sun, casting golden light upon them like a blessing from heaven. Around them, people wept and applauded. Jessica and Michael had already slipped away, shadows of their own downfall. But no one cared anymore, because in that moment, all that mattered was love, true, selfless, unbreakable love.